Opponent's gonna equip up their Isamaru. It's a 4-2 indestructible. Coming our way. Yep, I guess they want to get that battle going. We just whack each other until one of us goes down. Let's see who wins the race. Today on Commander Replay, we take Isamaru for a walk, and after some trouble, try to clean up this deck list. Next on Commander Replay. Hey guys, are you looking to get some card alters done? If so, be sure to check out RevelinsLight.com because they do absolutely amazing work, including my most favorite Aurelia altar. RevelinsLight.com, link is in the description below. Welcome back everyone, playing some Isamaru Hound of Khanda today. Today's deck list comes to us from Patreon supporter Frodo the Chef, who's in the game with us, also piloting Isamaru Hound of Khanda, so somewhat of a mirror match here. Take a look at this opening hand, one land. Oh, you know, if I knew we could draw a second land, Pure Steel Paladin is actually more card draw, and Pure Steel Paladin seems really good in this deck. Oh, it just seems too risky, though. Okay, that's fine. There's a Soul Ring. I don't know if this hand's going to do that much other than just play Isamaru and equip some stuff, though. So, this is going to be an interesting deck, and here's why. I'll jump over to the deck real quick. If you look at this deck list is like 40-something artifacts, mostly equipment, doesn't have a lot of removal, barely has any at all, has a little bit of ramp, not a ton, not as much as I would like, and doesn't have a lot in the way of card draw. This is kind of an all-in Voltron aggro deck, and it's just going to be really far outside my comfort zone. My comfort zone is decks that are well balanced. A lot of ramp, a lot of removal, decent amount of card draw, lots of value, with the ability to attack on top of that. That's what I like as a player. This deck is not that. It's not those things, so this is going to be outside my comfort zone by a pretty large margin. So we'll see how it goes today. Opponent is first in the turn order, and they will get to play their Isamaru first. So there they go. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting experience because I have a very certain way that I like to play and a certain way that I like to build my decks, which is generally balanced, so that I have some chance in like any game that I play. This deck, I don't think it's going to be able to remove problems very well. So if a problem hits the board, it's going to be up to someone else to deal with it, or you just have to hope that the game doesn't end. And that's not a thing that I love. And it might be true that some people are just more comfortable with that than I am. So let's take our turn here. Land, Soul Ring, we'll drop Blackblade Reforged. You know what? Maybe we go for this thing first. We'll go for the Banshee's Blade first just because it takes a little while to get that going. But anyway, some of you may be more comfortable with the game where someone just like has the combo in like 4, 5, or 6 turns if they got a fast start off of a Soul Ring and just saying, shuffle up, we'll go to the next game. Some people might be more comfortable with that than I am. I personally hate that. Like, I want to feel like I have a chance in every game that I play, and that in part dictates a lot of how I build my decks. Because I want to have removal for problems. I want to make sure that I hit ramp every single game because it's really tough to win when you don't ramp. So that's why I run a lot of ramp. You know, the past 2 years or so when a lot of people were saying like run 10 pieces of ramp, I've been in the 12 to 15 category. And that's what's been working really well for me. I saw an MTG Goldfish article recently that was kind of, it was basically just like a guide to how to build a commander deck. And I think it was actually from the spring sometime, but it just popped onto my radar in the past week or so. And, you know, they were advocating about 13 pieces of ramp, which kind of validated my own line of thinking, is that like 10 isn't really enough. 10 means sometimes you're still just not going to draw it. Once you start getting up around like 12, 13, 14, you have a much better chance of like drawing some kind of ramp in the game. So anyway, that's a lot of words to say. This deck is going to be all in on one thing. I don't think it's going to be particularly resilient. It's not going to have like a lot of problem solving capability, not a lot of removal, but I'm just going to have to be comfortable with that for this game. Like this is where we are and this is what we're doing. So we'll see how it goes. This will check the box for me, stepping outside my comfort zone for the week, I think. Anyway, brings it back to our turn. Opponent gets a Blind Obedience, and those are pretty good. You know what that's going to do? Make this Darksteel Ingot terrible. Play a Plains, play a Darksteel Ingot, play Isamaru. This is an Equip 2, and we'll pass like that. But I did talk to some of my Patreons before the game, and someone else, Zombie Caller, who's in a lot of games with us, said that he has faced this deck from Frodo, and he would rate it about a 6. So that gave me something to go on because it was actually really difficult for me to rate just because I'm used to having lots of removal and things like that. So there is potential for it to be strong, especially in like a removal light setting, and your own personal meta dictates so much of what is possible. If you play in a chill meta that doesn't have a lot of removal, yeah, you can play a deck with 40 equipments and probably have pretty good success with it. If you play in a very blue heavy meta where it's just going to be like counters and bounce on everything, then that's probably not going to work so good. So, everything kind of comes down to what type of setting are you playing in, what is the power level, what are your opponents doing, and that can really play a big role in whether a deck will be successful or not. So, opponent drops a Soul Ring right there. Yep, and here comes a Hammer of Nazan, getting going early. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I did make one change to this deck before the game. Given that there were 40 artifacts in here, I jammed a Mystic Forge into this deck because when you have 40-something artifacts, Mystic Forge seems awesome. So put that one in there just because I think it rightly deserves a spot in this deck. So yeah. Opponent's going to equip up their Isamaru. It's a 4-2 indestructible. Seems pretty good. Coming our way. Yep. I guess they want to get that battle going. I guess this is where we are. We just whack each other until one of us goes down. We'll see who wins the race. 4 damage coming in. 36 for Commander. And there's a Bloodforged Battle Axe. That's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Play the Plains. How much mana do we have? We have 6 total mana. Be 3 for that. It's 5 to get that going. That isn't terribly powerful yet. I think we equip the Banshee's Blade and equip the Bloodforged Battle Axe is what we do. Equip the Banshee's Blade. Here's a card I don't use that much. It's kind of cool. It does things, but at the end of the day, it only ever does damage, and I'm really a fan of equipments that generate value in addition to damage. Like, getting something else out of the card, I think, is really important. Now, that isn't to say that you don't have a couple cards that are just all about damage. Like, Black Blader Forged is really good about just being big damage, the finisher type of thing. Banshee's Blade is significantly slower and doesn't really give any additional upside. So, for basically 1 more mana, you get Black Blade Forged over this Banshee's Blade. Late in the game, that's kind of a big deal. Early in the game like this, there's some chance that we can have some success with the Banshee's Blade. We'll see how it goes. But we'll swing back into Frodo and just punch each other. And until one of us goes down, I guess, just start trading punches. First person to get Vigilance wins, I guess. So, sending 4 back at them. Triggers the Banshee's Blade, triggers the Bloodforged Battle Axe. It's 2 to equip, we only have 1 mana, so we'll pass like that. Does get a counter on the Banshee's Blade, so that's fun. You want to know who was running Banshee's Blade was... who was it? Whoever has that Mardu combat deck, it's Bruce and... Is it Ravos? I think it's Bruce and Ravos is the deck. Whoever's played that, we've seen it a couple times on camera now, where they double strike Necropolis Regent and things get wild. Hey now. Opponent just played a Clever Impersonator, copied a Hammer of Nazan, and free-equipped it to this Jace's Phantasm. Seems like a pretty good blocker with all these Isamarus running around the battlefield. And they're just going to leave it back, because, yeah, good blocking. Why not? Why not? Let's take a look at what our opponents are playing today. First up, we have Xenosai piloting Rayne Academy Chancellor. We've seen this deck a bunch of times in the past. It's Illusion Tribal, and Rayne is a cute little Illusion Tribal commander. Says, whenever you or a permanent you control becomes a target of spell or an ability and opponent controls, draw a card. You may draw an additional card if Rayne is enchanted. So when their things get targeted, they get to draw more cards. Haven't seen this one have a ton of success on camera, but a lot of times, this is going to be a fairly casual deck, and some of my decks, I think they start out casual, and then because I like a lot of ramp, a lot of removal, they are probably a little bit less casual than I expect going into the game. So, I don't know, this might be a good chance for them to actually have some success on camera, being that our deck is less well-rounded than some of the other decks that I play. So, Archpriest of Iona coming in. Not a lot of board wipes in our deck, probably none, actually. Same thing with the other Isamaru deck, so, if they're playing a creature deck and there's not a lot of board wipes, easy to keep your stuff on the board, which is nice. Anyway, Archpriest of Iona. Its power is equal to the number of creatures in your party. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. Interesting. And they did use a Finale of Devastation to get that into play, so it looks like we might be doing a party thing. Opponent, Chaotix 2075, by the way, is piloting Tazri Beacon of Unity. And it looks like they're trying to do the full party thing. I'll give this one a read since it is a newer one. 5 mana for a 4/6. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. and you can pay 2 hybrid color other than white. So you can pay either 4 colors or pay 2 colorless for each color you don't want to pay. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard and or ally cards from among them. Put them into your hand, the rest on the bottom. Kind of interesting. New little interesting take on Tazri. I think the old Tazri is just going to be stronger. That's a pretty crazy deck. You can do some wild stuff with it. We did the Tribal Commander Tribal a ways back with General Tazri. That one was pretty silly. But there's also some just really powerful ally builds that used to float around. I think one of them was even like a CEDH build. Was that a food chain deck? I don't remember. So yeah, you can do powerful stuff with the old one. Haven't seen this one in action much yet, so I'm not really sure. The fact that it doesn't put things directly onto the battlefield probably just makes it way less stronger than, anything else. But in a more casual setting, just having a card advantage from the top of your library is still pretty good too. So I'm sure it's not bad by any means. Rogue's Gloves coming into play, and opponent did use the Seal Shaper's Gift to get those Rogue's Gloves. So now they've got a 6/4 Indestructible, pro-black, pro-green, and they can draw some cards when they hit stuff. They're going to swing into the Tazri. Okay. Opponent hits, draws a card, plays a Pure Steel Paladin. Yep, that's a pretty good card in that deck. See who brought removal. There's a Plains. Yeah, that doesn't help us that much. Play the Plains. So, we can put a lot of commander damage on them. So either we eat Pure Steel Paladin if we attack them, or we put a lot of commander damage on them. But then they can also come back and put a lot of commander damage on us. And, that's a thing. I think I'm going to equip the Bloodforged Battle Axe. Because if we hit right here, we're going to get 2 Bloodforged Battle Axes, and that's kind of wild. I guess we just see if they're interested in blocking with the Pure Steel Paladin. But we are also liable to just take a huge commander hit on the way back. Yeah, there's 2 Bloodforged Battle Axe triggers. Nice. So we'll get 2 more of those. Trigger the Banshee's Blade. We'll equip both of the Bloodforged Battle Axes. Now it's a 12/4. It also could work that this could force opponent into a place where maybe they just want to block, because we do actually have Commander Lethal on them, but I suppose they can move things around with the Pure Steel Paladin also. As far as things that only do damage, Bloodforged Battle Axe also pretty good in that department. Generally, you want some sort of free equips to go with it. Those do help quite a bit. But, Isamaru's a 12/4 right now. That's not doing too bad. We do have a Soul Ring in there, so that does speed us up quite a bit. But yeah, something like Banshee's Blade, without easy double strike, Banshee's Blade generally going to be fairly underwhelming. Onerophage coming in for Xeno. Archpriest of Iona going to swing into us. Yep. Seems fair. Harvest Season for Chaotix. Going to be a pretty sad Harvest Season. X1. 1 basic land, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control. But better than nothing. It's better than nothing. So maybe has a Spoils of Adventure in his graveyard. I don't know how that got there. That's an Ahiri the Lithomancer. That's pretty good. That's probably going to win a value battle. Yeah, we're probably going to have to stop attacking now. We'll see what happens here. The other thing too is that sure, there are things that do damage. You also want to be getting evasion from your equipment. And again, Banshee's Blade only gives you damage. It's not even the best at that. Doesn't give you any additional evasion, which is super important for ground-based Voltron commanders. So I would take anything that gives you +2 and even so much as Menace. Trample, even better than that. And flying is probably one of the best of the easy to get kind of keywords. Unblockable, obviously, best form of evasion, but flying is generally a little bit easier to come by, especially when you're talking about just on your equipment. But anyway, opponent's gonna come back into us, Sword of Feast and Famine. Woof. Don't really have any plans for this. Open the vaults. Get rid of that. Opponent's gonna draw a card with the Rogue's Gloves. Yep. Yeah, honestly, I would take Rogue's Gloves over Banshee's Blade. There's a Plains. Play a Plains. Play a Blackblade Reforged. We could hit Chaotix here, but I'm not going to. Equip a Blackblade Reforged. It's a 17/9. Pass the turn. Yeah, so again, if this were anything that gave, trample at the very least, then, we could... Even a Cobbled Wings would probably be more attractive than just +2. And this is also the type of card that, if you draw it late, really not very good. You need to draw it early, so... that's the type of stuff that I like to stay away from, generally. Kind of my take on Voltron decks. You want to be generating value. Yes, you want to get size, but you also need to get other keywords, especially ones for evasion. Some lifelink is also really good as well. But I've got some ideas. We'll look at stuff after the game to see if we can get the deck to generate a little bit more value. Opponent's going to sacrifice their Throne of the High City and become the Monarch. Well, they're putting themselves on the throne. Now everyone's going to be looking for a way to wrestle that Monarch away from them, and I wish we had some form of unblockable so we could become the Monarch at least for a turn, although that might keep Isamaru off of our back for a little while. Opponent draws a card at the end step, triggers the Oneirophage. Giant Squid Illusion. Duskwatch Recruiter in tapped for Chaotix. It is a warrior. Taps out and passes. Opponent can plus Nahiri. You know, this might be the game where we see a Nahiri ultimate, which is it's a pretty hard one to get to. It is not the easiest thing to get that thing to ultimate. Isamaru into Chaotix. Changes his mind. Into the Illusion opponent. He can just block with the flyer. Unless he's got something. Could be some instant speed trickery afoot. We'll see. We'll see. It's probably not trample, though. Like, white doesn't really have, like, instant speed trample. Opponent's gonna block with the Jace's Phantasm. Yep. They bounce off of each other and nothing happens. Cool. Duskwatch Recruiter will flip over. Brings back to our turn. We draw planes. Yeah, didn't need that. Didn't need that. So I sent a message over to Zeno, told him he's safe from us if he wants to start working on that Nahiri. Says sounds like a good idea. Opponent drops down a Nykthos. Yeah. Imprison in the Moon on Nahiri. All right. So this should deal with the Nahiri problem. Hey, you want what just occurred to me? I was thinking about, like, what could I put in this deck for a card draw? A card that you don't see, as opponent draws at the end step here with the Monarch, gets a counter on Oneirophage. Kralin Horde Howler will flip back over. Finally remembered the name of it, had to look it up for a second. Avarice Amulet, as we see a Zagras coming into play. We'll talk about it in a second. So Avarice Amulet, equipped creature gets +2/+0, it has Vigilance, and at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. When equipped creature dies, target opponent gains control of Avarice Amulet. That is a card that would have been better before the death rule change, and I would say that, like, you'd probably want to put it in an Isamaru deck. But now, with the death rule change, I'm not so sure that you'd want to run that. So just a thought that I was having. You know, in general, a lot of things get better with the death rule change, but there's a random card that's actually gotten a little bit worse. It wasn't seeing a ton of play anyway. Like, most things have better card draw options than that, but if you're talking about, like, mono white Voltron and a commander that doesn't really generate value in any way, then, like, Avarice Amulet, very playable card. You can probably pick one up very cheaply, so yeah. If you're really in a pinch and you really need some card draw on a budget, sure, you can run it, but in general, there are going to be better options available to you now, but it does give you 2-0 in Vigilance, and that's not nothing either. Isamaru going on the attack, and Chaotix going to throw the Archpriest of Iona in front of it, sure. Let's backtrack to this Zagras. Zagras, Thief of Heartbeats. So 6 mana 4/4, costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party, has Flying Death Touch Haste getting shut off by the Blind Obedience right now, does come in tapped. Other creatures you control have Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a Planeswalker, destroy that Planeswalker, essentially Death Touch for Planeswalkers. Pretty cool little card. I know Chaotix has been really hot on building around the party mechanic since it's come out, and, you know, I've been kind of looking through some of the cards, like, I don't really know what to make of the party mechanic yet. And you look at something like Zagras, and you're like, Zagras is pretty cool, but I think the thing that makes it cool isn't necessarily related to the party mechanic. I think it's just a cool card that gives all your stuff Death Touch, and Death Touch for Planeswalkers, which is kind of sweet. So, I don't know, just something to think about. It's kind of the question of, like, there are good, like, design mechanics that don't have great cards to support them, and then there are also mechanics that aren't great, but have, like, 1 or 2 really good cards, and, you know, I think this card is good, not so much because of the party mechanic, but because it's just, like, cool and unique and interesting because of the other abilities on there. But I don't know, time will tell. We'll see. Brings it back to our turn. There's a Cloud Key. I guess we play a Plains, play a Cloud Key. Name Artifact. You know, this is a card that I probably need to look at a little bit more than I do, especially if you're playing, like, a creature-heavy kind of deck. Cost reduction is really good. I personally rate cost reduction, especially multiples of cost reduction. Like, if you have cost reduction of 2, I rate that as slightly worse than a mana doubler. And mana doublers are very good and often win games. So, like, if you have cost reduction 2, like an Urza's Incubator in a tribal deck, you're talking about a really powerful effect, especially as the game gets later. As that player has more mana, they can really get a lot of benefit out of some cost reduction. Now, cost reduction of 1 is still very good, and I would rate cost reduction of 1 somewhere in the vein of, like, maybe a Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus, or maybe a little bit better depending on what the deck is doing and depending on how they're built to use it. But, it's certainly in the conversation of they are very good mana rocks for decks that can use them the right way. So, cost reduction, powerful mechanic. And it's the type of thing that I think gets undervalued a little bit or under threat assessed when people are looking at what things to blow up on the board. Oh, that's a coat of arms. Well, that's interesting. These illusions just got huge. But yeah, I think cost reduction does fly under the radar a little bit when people are looking to spend artifact and enchantment removal or any kind of removal, really. So keep that in mind that, the later you get into a game, cost reduction gets better and better because just they have more mana, they can play more stuff and get more benefit out of it. But yeah, keep those in mind that those are legit targets to blow up with removal if you've got removal. Now, not going to do so much for us because our hand is empty in this moment, so unless someone plays a wheel, we are, in big, big trouble. Opponent going to do some attacking. Oneirophage into Isamaru opponent, and Illusory Angel into Chaotix. Didn't see this one come in. 3 mana. Cast this only if you cast another spell this turn. It's 6/6 flyer. Well, it's smaller than that. It's probably like a 3/3 flyer. Then the Coat of Arms, pumping it up. I played Coat of Arms in my Edgar Markov deck in paper for a little bit, and this thing is an absolute nightmare to track in paper because it's not so much like the main creature type, like dog, illusion, vampire, whatever. It's the secondary creature types that you have to keep track of, like, okay, who's a cleric, who's a wizard, who's a shaman, who's a warrior. You got to keep track of all that stuff, and it's a headache. It's a headache. It's a powerful card. I would say if you can avoid running this in paper just from the tracking standpoint, I would probably do that. If you are a red deck, for example, Shared Animosity is going to make life much better for you. I get it in blue. In blue, you don't really have other things that can do that, so that's fair. But yeah, it's a tracking nightmare in paper. Burnish Heart coming in for opponent does come in tapped. Yeah, that would have been a pretty good blocker. Death Touch, reasonably scary. Reasonably scary. This, a couple indestructible things on the board, though, and that does counteract the Death Touch, so we do not have indestructible, which is unfortunate. No attacks from opponent. Yeah, this is kind of what I talked about, is this deck does one thing, and it's not really built to, solve problems. We draw another land. That hurts. Drop a land. I'll pass the turn. Actually, do we just swing into Chaotix and eat a creature? No, because then if we do, we're wide open to everything else on the board, so yeah. Does Chaotix want to trade in a creature? Not really. I guess we just stalemate for a while. I get that, we could swing into Chaotix and, he'd block one, he'd lose his thing, Isamaru would go down, we could recast Isamaru and then try to re-equip everything. I get that we could do that, but then he also is, has incentive to just attack back at us, and then also, blockers and stuff, so, we're kind of just stuck in this pattern, yeah, we could do that and burn some resources from him, but then I don't want him to, spend his resources on us, because I think that's just going to work out super poorly if it does. Opponent casts an Essence Leak. As long as enchanted permanent is red or green, it has at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this permanent unless you pay its mana cost. That's kind of cool. They put it on their commander, which is blue, so it basically does nothing. It's just an enchantment, which allows that second card draw ability to trigger. However, you can use that in a pinch against red and green decks if there's something you really don't like on the board. To kind of either get rid of the permanent or tax them in a really painful way. So I like that. It's a fun little card right there. Moves the Hammer of Nazan over to Rayne. Sure. Xeno sending out some attacks, spreading it around a bit. This one's got flying and Death Touch. See if Chaotix wants to trade that in or not. Actually, he can block this safely, I think. Yeah, he's gonna do that. Unless Xeno's got something. I wonder if he flashed in some illusion or something that makes it bigger. Doesn't seem out of the question, right? Jace's Phantasm goes down. Okay, no trickery afoot. 3 damage on the Zagros. Chaotix down to 20. Frodo down to 17. Instep trigger. Oneirophage gets bigger. Chaotix gonna crack the Burnish Heart, get some ramp going. Probably could have left that up for a blocker, but I guess the Death Touch is scary enough. Although, yeah, that's still indestructible. Gets 2 planes. Sword of Truth and Justice. Hey, that's bad for us. That means I can also get through the Illusions player, though. And, that's a thing. That's a thing. They're at 38, drawing cards with a bunch of big flyers in play. They're going to extort one time. Yep. Pure Steel Paladin, Hammer of Nazan trigger. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we were better off keeping that other hand with the Pure Steel Paladin because it's just so good in this deck. The question is, how long were we going to have to wait to get our second land to do it? And I don't know. That's the question. Xeno's thinking no, gonna reality shift the Isamaru. Honestly, I'd probably reality shift the Pure Steel Paladin more than anything. Because that they can just recast. Yeah, it won't even be that hard because they can free equip with the Pure Steel Paladin. It does stop this attack though. Or does it? No, because they can just equip everything. Yeah, they could have timed that better also. Well, I guess with the Sword of Truth and Justice coming in, I guess they kind of had to, but yep. Recast Isamaru, re-equips all the stuff, drops in Urza's tower. Ghostly Prison, yeah, that's pretty good. I was worried about that when I was looking through this deck earlier. I'm like, this deck seems really weak to prison effects. You drop a Sphere of Safety, and it's just like, how do you deal with that? You don't. Ghostly Prison into play. Brings us back to our turn, we draw a Steel Shaper's Gift. That is super helpful. Cast Steel Shaper's Gift. Alright, as you can see, there are many equipment in this deck. What are we going for? We have mana. Helm of the Host is like, fine, I guess. Helm of Cauldra is interesting. Trample is a big deal. First Strike is cool. Indestructible is good off the hammer. Grafted Exoskeleton sort of gets around Indestructible, but I don't know, that's probably not what I'm really feeling. Double Strike is cool, not going to do it. Indestructible ourselves. Conqueror's Flail, meh. Colossus Hammer is big. Menace is fine. We're kind of past the point of Menace being good. Chariot of Victory, Trample. Trample is a thing. That's probably one of the things we're looking for. Champion's Helm. Captain's Hook is Menace. Makes a token. Lifelink if it's a human. It is not. Trample. Trample seems reasonable. Oh, equip 4. Woof. Bone Splitter, Bone Saw. Nope. Death Touch, Lifelink. Doesn't help with Indestructible. Assault Suit. Assault Suit is funny, is what that is, but does remove our blocker, which is bad. Argentum Armor is a card. How much mana do we have? I don't think enough to play and equip it. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, I think we're one short. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Ugh. Well, no one's played any removal up to this point, but I think it's just got to be... that's flying. It gives us blocking. Doesn't help with everything else, though. Yeah, I think it's just got to be Argentum Armor. I don't run this in a lot of decks because even with free equips, like, you got to have one in play. It's just so much mana. Yep, we don't have enough. So we're just going to stay put for a while and hope people don't come and kill us while we try to do the Argentum Armor thing next turn. Pass the turn. Spark Double coming into play. This could be kind of wild. Opponent doing some attacking. Ooh, that's going to be a big hit our way. Yep. Gonna feel this. Down to 9. Ouch. We could die to just like random stuff on the board. That's a flyer. We don't have anything for that. Opponent draws a card at the end step. Neurophage triggers. Linvala, Shield of Seagate coming into play. I gotta read this one again. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, choose target non-land permanent and opponent controls. Until your next turn, it can't attack, block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Sacrifice it. Choose hexproof or indestructible. Creatures you control gain that ability until end of turn. That's pretty cool. A lot of good stuff on there for 3 mana. Does come in tapped. Is a 6/6 though. Ooh, that's an Aven Mind Sensor. Glad they didn't play that while we searched. What's interesting right now is that the other Isamaru doesn't have Commander Lethal on the Rayne opponent. And with Nahiri under the Imprison in the Moon, I think they have a lot of incentive to try and take them out, more so than anyone else. Nice, opponent's going to activate a Makokoro. I think they just dropped that in. We badly need a card. We draw a Bone Splitter. Yep, that's not what I was hoping to draw into. And this is the type of card that you really want to get away from. The only thing that's good about this card is that it's efficient. It does a little bit of damage, and that's really about it. It doesn't give you anything else beside that. And in my opinion, that really doesn't make it worth a card slot. Oh, that's a Shadow Spear for opponent. That's actually a pretty good one because that's going to shut off all this indestructible from the Rayne opponent. Pure Steel Paladin, Hammer of Nazan will trigger. Opponent's going to Eel Umbra, flash it in. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. Totem Armor. I'm not sure what the point of that was. To do it on the tapped creature. Here comes 10 over into Xeno. And that is unblockable due to the Pro Blue. He's running a different list than ours because our list does not have Truth and Justice in it, nor does it have Feast and Famine, so his list is definitely, like, better than ours. Shadow Spear. Ooh, hey now. That is a Cyclonic Rift. Is that overloaded? I don't think it is. Maybe it is. If it is, it's going to crush all of our Bloodforged Battle Axe tokens. And then we're probably just going to die to stuff. Yep, it was overloaded. Good a game. Does he have enough to kill all of us? Soul Ring for opponent. Hammer of Nazan. Isamaru. Did that in the wrong order. Shadow Spear. Brings it back to our turn. There's a Conqueror's Flail. Oh, yep. This is going to be bad. Play Isamaru. Play Cloud Key. Rename artifacts. Soul Ring for free. Bone Splitter for free. Bloodforged Battle Axe for free. Get Darksteel Ingot for 2. Banshee's Blade. That's another reason why this isn't good. It's the second a rift happens, you reset everything, and it's really not doing anything for you. Conqueror's Flail. Blackblade Reforged. And we can equip one. I guess we'll equip the Conqueror's Flail. Just in case we survive on the off chance. Seems unlikely, but stranger things have happened. And I did talk about the power of cost reduction earlier. After that rift, this Cloud Key made recasting all this stuff really easy. Usually when you get rifted, it's often a full 2 turns before you're really back up to speed. You know, we got all of our stuff into play. Sure, it's not equipped, but, you know, that'll be the next thing that we probably try to do. But, you know, as far as a rift rebuild goes, that was actually pretty good. And that was largely in part due to the cost reduction. Also, just some of this stuff being efficiently costed anyway, but cost reduction played a big part of that. So we all survived, but we're all low on life. We're at 3, Chaotix at 13, Frodo at 12. So Chaotix casts a Solemn Simulacrum, gets a land, and then brings back his Duskwatch Recruiter. Pure Steel Paladin back to play for Isamaru. Rogue's Gloves in, triggers Pure Steel, triggers Hammer of Nazan. Basilisk Collar in. Truth and Justice in, Pure Steel Paladin, Hammer trigger. Shadow Spear back in for equip. So a bunch of things on Isamaru right now. Still not Commander lethal though. Champion's Helm in, draws a card, freeze equip. Opponent hits, it's unblockable. Rogue's Gloves, Feast and Famine, Truth and Justice, and they become the Monarch. Return to Dust for opponent, gonna hit the Hammer of Nazan and the Coat of Arms. Yeah, that's been needing to happen for a while. Rayne triggers a whole bunch of times, so opponent's gonna draw a million cards right here. They have a counterspell. Reasonable chance to find it drawing 4, right? Onerophage gonna get bigger. Yup. Lifelink is something we could use pretty badly. Darksteel Plate, it's pretty good. Pure Steel, Hammer of Nazan. Sword of the Animist. Everyone is a million cards ahead of us. Pure Steel Paladin with Darksteel Plate on it now does mean that we can't just Argentum Armor, shoot their Pure Steel, and whack him over the head with this Isamaru. Colossus Hammer A. For the most part, I don't care for this outside of Cirque Win, unless you're like running all of the free equips, but even then, I don't know. It's fine, but if you ever have to pay the equip 8, it's a bad time. It's a real bad time. So now Isamaru has kind of become unstoppable. We could shoot some of their swords. Nahiri is still out of play. Play the Argentum Armor. Equip the Argentum Armor. We've got a 9/9. We'll swing into Chaotix. He probably wants to draw. Swing into KO. Argentum Armor, shoot Hammer of Nazan, I think. It's been enabling quite a bit over there. We're kind of stuck. Like, our role in this game is basically just limited to, like, being the spoiler now. We've got 3 life. We can't block flyers. We are dead to basically everything. KO just takes the hit. Apparently he wants a Solemn Simulacrum. We can play these for free. Why not? Actually, Shram is in the deck, so, like, maybe hang on to him. I don't think we're going to survive. There's no reason that we should survive. So, Rayne's turn. They should have lethal here. 3 coming our way. That'll take us down. 4 to KO in the air. That should take them down. 24 from the Onerophage into Frodo. That should take him down. Down we go. Xenocide taking it down. His Rayne Illusions deck finally getting there. Puts everyone exactly to 0. Exactsies on the table. So yeah, my fears kind of came true in this game, is that, like, we just weren't able to do that much because a lot of the equipments in here just don't matter. So I'm going to make some piles and we'll talk about things that we can do with the deck and some cards to add, get rid of, and so on and so forth. So give me just one moment for that. Okay, I've separated the deck into some piles right here. This first pile is cards that I just don't like. We need to get rid of these. As I talked about a bunch through the game, you look at a card like this Barbed Battle Gear. The only thing this card ever does for you is damage. It makes Isamaru bigger. The key really is with Voltron decks, yes, you want size, but you also want abilities and keywords. And that's why the Sword Cycle is just always the best for Voltron decks, because you get so many abilities out of them. So like, let's take a look at Sword of Sinew and Steel. Protection from 2 colors, size, and is also removal. That's a huge deal, and this just does so much more than Barbed Battle Gear can ever give you. And that's really the idea. You want value, you want abilities, removal, keywords are really important, and all of these equipments that only give you size, they don't really impact the board that much, because like we saw in this game, we couldn't get past our opponent's blockers, and we had this giant creature that we just had to sit there with that would have been easy lethal on the table if we could just swing past everything, but without evasion of any sort, we were stuck. So the most important thing is abilities and keywords, and then get size where you can. There's a couple equipment whose job is always damage and will just always be better than like most of the other equipments that only do damage. For example, the big ones are going to be Blackblade Reforged, Colossus Hammer, and Bloodforged Battle Axe. They only do damage, but they're so efficient at it that you really just don't need any of the other ones whose only function is damage. And one card you could add, doesn't show up much these days, been kind of usurped by Blackblade Reforged, but Stratascythe, very similar to Blackblade Reforged. You know, if you want another damage-only equipment that's just going to give you a lot of size, Stratascythe's going to be pretty good, and we're also going to work the deck in a way to get a little bit more ramp going as well. So, anyway, I'm going to make a pile right here for cards that I've added, so I would probably add a Stratascythe. Also, Imperial Plate is a damage-only kind of card. Does it truly belong in this deck? I don't know. One thing to consider is that I don't think you play Isamaru because you want the strongest possible mono-white Voltron deck. Shram for 1 more mana gives you a card draw on every single equipment you play, and, you know, in a general sense is just going to be better because of that. So you play Isamaru because you want to, and you want to have fun, and you think it's something fun to build around. So that being the case, you know, Shram for 1 more mana does a lot more than Isamaru does. Keep that in mind. But since we are focused on Isamaru today, we'll stay with the concept of... But since we are focused on Isamaru today, we'll stay with this Isamaru build. Shram, I think, does work differently. Cards like Bonesaw can be valuable in that deck because they're all redraws. In this deck, I just don't think that's where you want to be. So here's the things that I think are just easy cuts because they just don't do enough. And this will be the pile of cards that I'm adding to the deck. And if you're going to have a lot of artifacts, Mystic Forge is going to be really cool. The second pile right here, these are cards, they aren't completely useless, but there are still better options. So he did tell me that he wasn't working on any specific budget and that this is a Magic Online deck, so cards are generally cheaper. That being the case, I'm going to cut most of these also because I think we can do a lot better. I'll put these back into the pile. So that gives us, what, 18 deck slots to work with? We can do a lot with that. The first thing I really want to focus on is evasion. That's the thing that got us in this game. We just couldn't get through. So start with Rogue's Passage. This is a land that gives you unblockable. Really good for Voltron decks. It's a game winner, usually. There's also a lot that can be done with the lands in this deck, too. We'll kind of come back to that. Kind of focusing on the evasion right now. Rogue's Passage, must have. Sajiri Step? Could be reasonable. Yeah, it comes in tapped, but target creature gains protection from the colors of your choice until end of turn. That's unblockable against a single color. I think it's worth trying. Okay, so he did say this is an MTGO deck, no specific budget, so of course all of the swords, or as many as you want. Feast and Famine being the very best. Fire and Ice being super needed in mono white for the card draw. Sinew and Steel is going to give you removal. Truth and Justice is okay. You could certainly run it if you want to. I'm not the biggest fan of Truth and Justice, but it's fine. Sort of Body and Mind also isn't terrible in this deck either because of the protection colors, and also just having some bodies to block with, I think, is actually reasonably valuable. So I would probably add that. It's not going to be for like every single game ever. Don't mill the green-black player. Try to mill the mono-blue player if you can. They probably want their combo in their hand, not in their graveyard. Some other things that I think are going to be really good. Sword of Vengeance is like everything you want. It's a bunch of keywords that matter with a little bit of size. So that's a very good one. Card that I don't think you necessarily need to add, but I do think is reasonable. Sigiled Sword of Valoron is going to give you 2-0 Vigilance and is going to give you bodies. So I think that's at least worth checking out. But any of the other swords from that cycle are also very, very good. You could certainly make a case for War and Peace if you want the life gain, plus the additional damage is solid. Continuing on the theme with evasion, there's a couple more things that I think we can add. Trailblazer's Boots give you non-basic land walk, which is really good. Fleet Feather Sandals, gonna be solid flying and haste, especially if you have to recast. And Bladed Pinions, it's gonna be flying and first strike. Key to the City is also a very solid card because it allows you to loot things, so you can like loot lands away if you're doing like land tax, gift of estates type stuff. Oh, Luxodon Warhammer, of course. So this is going to be size, trample, and lifelink, all of which are really good. I think you probably want Umezawa's in the deck. Gives you removal, gives you life gain. It works best with double strike. We'll want to check out some sources of double strike after. Anyway, that's a lot more evasion in the deck, and that's exactly where we got stuck in this game. But there's some other things we need too. I think card draw is going to be a big one. Tome of Legends. And because you're adding Tome of Legends, you also add Manifold Key. This allows you to either untap your Tome of Legends, or you can make Isamaru unblockable when you need to do that. Now, the next thing we do need to get some removal into this deck. Single Combat, I think, is going to be really good for this deck. We'll add that in. Obviously, Swords and Path. Prison Term, I think, is a really interesting card. It kind of gives you some flexibility on the thing you need to remove from combat. Used up our deck slots already. A few more things on card draw. Do we have Skull Clamp in here? No Skull Clamp. I mean, you could run... Yeah, I'd probably just run Skull Clamp. People are going to try to blow up Isamaru. Like, that's what's going to happen in the game. If it does, you're going to draw some cards. Also, there's, a few things that make bodies. The core equipment makes bodies. Nahiri makes bodies. So there could potentially be some things to sacrifice to the Isamaru. I would probably add an Endless Atlas to this deck. That's going to round out the card draw a lot more. So you've got Key to the City to loot lands away. You've got Skull Clamp if things die. Fire and Ice. Mystic Forge. And then there were some other things in the deck, like Mangara was already in the deck. Ugin can draw you a card occasionally. Definitely just want like a Crush Contraband, Return to Dust type of thing. Actually, you know what we can do in this deck? We can go Dismantling Wave. Dismantling Wave's been pretty good for me. I've cycled it a couple times, and that's... you probably won't cycle it, actually, honestly, in this deck. But even still, the 3 mana, blow up 3 things, pretty good. And then Heliod's Intervention. Okay, so I'm going to resort this by converted mana cost, because all these piles are kind of messed up. So here's a lot of the things we're adding. Here's a few more. Definitely got a little bit more removal into the deck. Let's take a peek at the mana ramp. The mana ramp seemed to be a little bit lackluster, too, when I was kind of going through this. I would cut this all that glitters. I mean, again, all it does is size, and cards that do that aren't my favorite, especially in this deck where, like, I get it in, like, Shram where it's going to draw you a card, but... Okay, so here's the mana ramp we're looking at. Actually, I forgot Sword of Feast and Famine. One of the newer ones that we've just added. Everything else was actually in the deck beforehand, so that's good. So the deck started with about 10 pieces of mana ramp. I took out Paradise Mantle because I don't think it's very good for this deck. I would still increase this a little bit. I would add a Thran Dynamo. I would add a Mind Stone for the Sun Titan. No Sun Titan in this deck. We got to get a Sun Titan in this deck. I'd still add a Mind Stone because I'm probably also going to add Savines here in a second, so... Cryptic Trilobite, I haven't seen in action, so I'm leaving it in because I don't actually know if it's good enough or if it's, I just haven't really seen it at all. So without that, until I can kind of get a feel on it. But what I would do, Mana Geode, not doing much for me. I would definitely try to get to the 2 mana rocks. Pick your favorite one. I'm going to go for a Thought Vessel, right? Maybe Thought Vessel's not the best. What are other choices? Arcane Signet, I guess, for the colored mana. But that can be any of the 2 mana rocks. Another question with this deck, you've got Avacyn and this Ulamog up at the top, and, like, those are so much mana. This deck just doesn't generate that kind of mana, I don't think. So, like, I'd probably get rid of these. I would definitely get rid of the Ulamog. It's going to be so much mana. We could have casted the Avacyn in that game. That game went fairly long. So, we'll try to keep it. It's not my favorite. Avacyn, I noticed, is you play an Avacyn, and it's just prone to, like, get hit with all kinds of removal, and that's not great. So I've resorted by converted mana cost. A lot of 3-drops. We could probably cut a couple of those. Okay, as much as I really wanted it in the deck, I think I'm going to cut Bladed Pinions. Probably cut this Imperial Plate. We are mono white without great card draw. Think that'll probably cause problems. Oh, you know what else? So we've got a Ghostly Prison right here, and while this card is fine, you know, it kind of depends on the table. Like, green decks produce so much mana now, sometimes they just don't care about Ghostly Prison, and that's a thing. Personally, I'd probably go for Thaumatic Compass. Another thing that I would 100% add is going to be Duelist Heritage. We want more sources of Double Strike. A card that you could look at is Inquisitor's Flail. You don't see this one as much as you used to. You really don't want blockers. Blockers cause problems for Inquisitor's Flail, but it's certainly worth checking out. It's not double strike per se, but it is double damage. So you really want either indestructible or unblockable if you're going to be using this, but it will help you kill people much quicker. I'll be honest, I don't think Colossus Hammer is great for this deck. You've got Sigarda's Aid, and you got Hammer of Nazan and Pure Steel Paladin. If you don't have those, it's a lot of mana. It's just really a lot of mana. And you've already got Argentum Armor, so like late in the game, you're going to tutor for Argentum Armor probably over a Colossus Hammer. Colossus Hammer is, again, just damage. But I don't know. I just don't think this deck is well set up for it. If you had all of the red free equips, I think it would be much better. But without those, I can live without it. I'm going to cut the Sigiled Sword of Valoron right here. I do like it, but we are a little heavy on 3, and we need to get rid of some cards. I do think this deck wants a land tax. You definitely want some amount of like land tax, tithe, gift of estates type stuff in here. Take your pick between the 3 based on your budget. We want to get a Savine's Reclamation into this deck. I don't think Helm of the Host is really necessary in this deck. There aren't that many good creatures to go get. I get you can do the Stone Hero Giant thing with it, which is all right, but it's never really game winning. You use Stone Hero Giant, get a Helm of the Host, make a second Stone Hero Giant, then get the equipment that you want to get. But it's mana intense, it's kind of slow. Never works out as great as I want it to, but I think you can cut a land. I wouldn't say no to a Brass Squire in this deck, but we are running out of deck slots. You tap it for a free equip. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of Avacyn. I've noticed more problems than anything playing Avacyn. Like, it's so big. It's one of those removal check kind of cards. Like, if you play it, if someone has anything that, like, kills, steals, or bounces it, they're going to use it. And that's kind of reduced its effectiveness. So I would go no Avacyn. I get it. It's attractive to protect all of your equipment because sometimes Austere Commands and Vandal Blasts will happen, but from like an efficiency standpoint and like from what typically happens when you play an Avacyn is it just eats up so much of everyone's focus that they like can't stop thinking about Avacyn. So we're going to get rid of it right here. And I'll do a couple more things. I'm going to add some lands to the deck. We can beef up the mana a little bit. I'm going to add a Strip Mine, Tectonic Edge. A big one is going to be Makokoro and Gaia Reach Sanitarium. I would also add Arch of Orzka. Potentially even the one that makes you the Monarch, although this deck might have trouble defending itself as the Monarch. Could be a reason to add Brave the Sands to this deck. You know, if you're going to have this big stacked Isamaru, then having it have Vigilance and everything else I think is going to be pretty good. There's a Terrain Generator in here. That card usually isn't very good. I would get rid of it. It's not typically worth it to pay that mana to ramp. If you want that type of effect, Walking Atlas is much better. Got Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Tower. I guess it's fine. Without ways to tutor for it, it's going to be really difficult to find those. Homeward Path, because this deck will get crushed if someone steals your commander. Buried Ruin for getting your stuff back. I'd probably put like a Mystifying Maze in the deck so you have a little more protection. Potentially even a Maze of Ith, but I don't love that Maze of Ith doesn't produce mana. Especially you're mono white, so like you're already not great at producing mana. So I'd go for Mystifying Maze. I'd go for that other newer one that's very similar to Mystifying Maze. That also fogs a creature. And that helps out the mana base a bit. There's still more things you could do to tweak the mana and get more from your lands, but that's going to be a pretty good start right there. You got a little bit of land destruction if you need it. You got Unblockable and Rogue's Passage, which is a big one. Little bit of protection. Ooh, Core Haven. Core Haven is a card. Add a Core Haven. Because we've added card draw to the deck, I think we can go down to 36 lands. We've also got a land tax and Thaumatic Compass in there. More ramp. And the deck has a fairly low curve now. Like, we're not trying to get to these 11 drops, so that's a good place to be. A lot of stuff at 3, and the 3 mana stuff will keep you busy for sure, unless you have Hammer of Nazan or Pure Steel Paladin. Could be a reason to add a tutor for Pure Steel Paladin. It is that good that I would justify adding a tutor for it, but that's going to be like a personal choice kind of thing. There are still other things that I would add to this deck, but just for the sake of like not being here all day working on this, we need to cut 1 card. We'll cut a Darksteel Ingot. It's fine, but Darksteel Ingot down. Here's the other things that I would do to this deck. If it were mine personally, I would have less equipment overall. Make sure the equipment that I do have is really impactful. I would add a couple stacks pieces to this deck. Depends on the meta, depends on where you really envision playing this deck. But something like a Deafening Silence or Aethersworn Canonist could be really good, just to slow down opponents who like to generate absurd amounts of value. Aethersworn Canonist would actually be really good for this deck, so I'd probably add something like that. Any of the like Flying Hate Bears, even Mind Sensor, all pretty good. That new one that's kind of ridiculous that flies, was it a Griffin, I think, could certainly be very good. I'd probably add 2 or 3 stacks pieces just to keep opponents honest and make sure they don't run away with value. I would still love to get more removal in the deck. There's still a few other things that I would like to do, but for the sake of like trying to wrap this up, this is going to be a much better presentation than what we saw in the game. We have evasion, which is the big thing. So when we make Isamaru huge, we're going to be able to get through with it. We have some removal. We can deal with some amount of problems that might creep up on board. We trimmed out the big stuff on the curve, which I just don't think it's going to help that much because you're not going to have access to it for large portions of the game. It's really only good in the super late game. So, I think you can live without that stuff. I'd love to see another piece of recursion or 2, either an Emeria Shepherd or a Cavalier of Dawn. Both are good. But anyway, yeah, I'll wrap this up. So I think this deck kind of this list came over as like essentially draft leftovers. A lot of equipments that may or may not be useful in draft. And the key is you want your equipment to give you abilities and generate value where possible. So essentially either evasion or value with some size added onto them where possible. And sure, you may have to rebalance some of these things a little bit. Now we've taken away a lot of things that do add size. You do got to make sure you're getting to Commander Lethal reasonably easy. Wouldn't say no to a Citadel Siege, just to keep putting counters on it every turn. But yeah, you don't want to get focused on damage so much as you really want abilities, keywords, and value, or if you can get removal from your equipment, that's a really good place to be. You want solid mana ramp, added a lot more card draw to the deck, added some removal to the deck, so just a much more well-rounded version of Isamaru. And again, there's still more things that I would do if it were my deck personally, but this will get you into a much better place. So anyway, wrap it up here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, in addition to my TCG affiliate player link, I now have an affiliate link with Flipside Gaming, an LGS from my hometown. You can use the promo code REPLAY to save 10% on your next order over $10. Both affiliate links are in the description below. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. If you want to help support the channel and vote on which decks I play next, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below.